Hi, my name is Ezekiel Lewis, and the topic I decided to go with was a Spanish tradition known as Running of the Bulls, also known as the San Fermin Festival. In terms of why I was interested in this topic, I became interested when it was brought up to us briefly in Spanish class. I've all been interested in it and learning about it for a while, ever since I saw little clips of it via social media, etc. But I've never done actual research on it. So once I heard that that was an option for this specific discussion, I wanted to do that one. Um, in terms of personal relevance, I don't really have, unfortunately, I don't have any ties to this tradition, this Spanish tradition specifically. Um, but as I stated before, I just wanted to learn more about it. So I kind of did a lot of research. um, in terms of the questions I had three main questions. Them being, when did this tradition begin? What does this tradition symbolize? And why do people participate? Um, the answer for those questions in terms of when this tradition began, that would be the 13th century. I tried to find a more specific date than that, but however, each of the sources I attempted to look for that did not provide that information. Um, the tradition symbolizes mainly and mostly the symbolism is for the commemorate the martyrdom, of San Fermin. And then, in terms of why people participate, uh, this goes back to when the tradition originally took place, but people participate and ask San Fermin for protection, basically, and before the event even starts, before the event occurs. And most people claim that this event was basically essential for any butchers in the area or any people who owned a butcher shop. This would help them basically bolster their business, I guess. Um, in terms of any of the previous knowledge I knew beforehand, before I started researching this, I knew that this was some form of Spanish tradition, just the basics. I knew that that was what it involved in. And then that participants, each of the people who partake in this tradition, this event, um, like are able to choose whether they do or don't. Nobody is forced into this tradition. It's not something that's for a specific family ties. It's for any and anybody who chooses to go, basically. I also knew that there was some amount of physical injuries that take place from this event just by the clips that I've seen from social media. I didn't know that based off of any previous research. I just, from physical evidence, I've seen people get seriously injured from this event. Um, in terms of some of the more specifics that I learned about this tradition, I wanted to talk more about the reasons people are protesting this tradition, protesting the running of the bulls in general. Um, People protest this for two reasons. One being the cruelty aspect of it, and two, the amount of injuries slash rates of death caused by this event. Um, when it comes to the cruelty aspect, a lot of the bulls that participate in this tradition are unfortunately and somewhat barbarically killed after this event takes place. Most people feel that killing a quote unquote somewhat defenseless animal should not be celebrated, even if it is a tradition. Um, Most people feel that this is wrong, especially when it comes to just the subject of animal cruelty, and feel like this just shouldn't take place any longer. When it comes to injuries and death, about between the numbers of 200 and 300 people are injured from the tradition of running of the bulls annually. Each year, about between 200 and 300 are either seriously injured or have minor injuries. Regardless, that's a lot of people. Of those people, about 3% of them come out with quote unquote serious injuries, those are the people whose injuries are more severe. Some of the injuries entailed like becoming paralyzed or having multiple broken bones, etc., etc. About 15 people, however, each year die from this event, die from this tradition. Unfortunately, 15 people at least each year lose their lives to this tradition, to this event. From those two reasons alone, the cruelty when it comes to the bulls themselves and the deaths and injuries, a lot of people just aren't in agreement with this tradition, or are having a hard time standing with this tradition in the Spanish culture, and find it just overall wrong. Unfortunately. Questions that I had remaining after doing this previous research are, I wanted to know more in terms of why. Like, why I don't know whom specifically out of the Spanish culture, but why did they kill the bulls, basically? Like, why? I wanted to know why. Yeah, like, why did they take away the lives of the bulls? Like, I don't know. I just found that very bizarre to me. Because this whole event was not what I expected it to be, I guess. And I'll get more into that in a minute. But my second question also was, why hasn't the tradition been stopped? Because it seems like these protests have been taking place for quite a while, and it seems like the talks about ending this quote unquote tradition have been in talks for a couple of years now, or however long. So I wanted to know, I guess, why exactly, what's preventing this tradition from ending, what's still holding people from letting this tradition go, I guess. Yeah, in terms of what surprised me the most out of all of this, I definitely have to say it was the bulls being killed. As to why, I don't know. I guess I expected something completely different. When I heard about Running of the Bulls and watched clips of Running of the Bulls, I expected there to be some sort of event that was strictly for fun or pleasure purposes. I didn't realize that, and also not only that, but due to the title alone, Running of the Bulls, I felt like people in the Spanish culture would want to guard the bulls or protect the bulls more so than rather take away their lives or end the life of the bulls after the event has taken place. I thought they would more so like wrangle up the bulls, possibly let them go, or even take care of them after the tradition was over. I was led to believe that this was more of a welcoming tradition rather than more of a violent one, I guess. So I guess that's why when I heard that the bulls are killed after the event is over, I found it so surprising, to me at least. Yeah, and after doing a little more research, I found out that the bulls are killed through bullfighting, which makes sense as to why people felt that they were brutally being killed. I mean, because bullfighting in general it's very rough, especially watching the bulls fall to the bullfighters. Just seeing them killed in that brutish manner I could see how that's upsetting to a lot of people in general. Some of the preconceived notions I had, I don't know, I had the misconception that this was more so a common event rather than a tradition. Like I said earlier, I felt like this was used for pleasure purposes. I thought this was something, like I've seen this tradition in some old movies that I sat down and watched with my father, and it seemed like one of those things that you would do to I don't know, cross something off your bucket list. It seemed like it was just a more pleasurable and playful event. I know that some people were still injured during this event, but I had no idea all the violence and all the troubles that also came with this tradition as well. Um, in terms of how this changed my perspective after doing all this research and reading more about this tradition, I definitely can say that I originally felt that this was something that anyone could do just for whatever their reasons are. But after reading this, I wouldn't recommend it, and it's probably probably unwise for most people to do this just due to the fact of injuries alone and possibility of death. Um, I wouldn't recommend this for anybody, let alone myself. And on top of that, I don't particularly enjoy the fact of thinking about animal cruelty, let alone an animal being killed in this manner is just, it's somewhat upsetting. I'm not. I know some other people will find it more upsetting than me, but even I don't find that great. Honestly, it's pretty sad. Um, in terms of the comparison aspect of the U.S., um, I try to think and do some research on certain holidays or traditions that we do that could, I don't know, somewhat equal out to that. And honestly, in terms of the traditions in the U.S., in terms of the most common ones, such as Fourth of July or Christmas, etc., um, our traditions aren't as violent. I guess in terms of the animal cruelty aspect, the only one that I could think of really that's most common was Thanksgiving and how we kill the turkey. But in terms of the representation and the meaning behind Thanksgiving, it still wasn't as, I don't know. I don't want to say bad, but I that's how I kind of feel on it. Um, we do, however, have an event that takes place that's called the Great Bull Run, which is basically a mirror of the running of the bulls. It's mostly for people here in the States who are unable to go overseas in order to participate in the actual running of the bulls, for whatever their reasons may or may not be. Um, is this comparison easy? Not really. It was just hard finding one of our traditions that wasn't taken from somewhere else really. That to compare it to running of the bulls, like I couldn't think of one that was as equally violent or unappealing in that way in terms of death rates, injuries, etc. Like in terms of the states, we just didn't have one similar. In terms of the more minor traditions that aren't as common, there might be something in that I wasn't able to find that may be able to compare. But in terms of the range of the tradition and the popularity of the tradition, there's probably none that comes close in that way. In terms of overall new conclusions, it comes to a close with this tradition and my learnings. I definitely think that overall, different countries and different cultures will ultimately have different traditions and will do things very differently. Whether that means some traditions are more violent than others or some are more easygoing. It just depends on that culture itself and the representation behind the traditions it has. Um, I will say though that this was one of the more physically alarming ones, and that some traditions are just unsafe. So overall, those are my findings on this event, this tradition. I learned a lot about this, and I had a good amount to say about it, but overall, I just wanted to. I did enjoy the process of learning more about this, so I will say that. But that's all I had. Thanks.